At my wedding reception, I watched my mom lean over to my brother Jacob and whisper something that made his face go pale. He immediately stood up and left the restaurant while all our guests were still celebrating. What could possibly be so urgent that my own brother would disappear in the middle of my wedding, and why was my mother the one orchestrating it? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The afternoon sun poured through the tall windows of Marcello's Italian restaurant, casting golden light across the white tablecloths and creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. I stood near the entrance in my wedding dress, greeting guests as they arrived, feeling like I was floating. This was it. The day I'd been planning for 18 months was finally here. My husband Daniel stood beside me, his hand resting on the small of my back, both of us grinning so hard our faces hurt. Every handshake, every hug, every congratulations felt surreal. Aunt Patricia handed me a beautifully wrapped gift and pulled me into one of those tight embraces that smelled like her signature lavender perfume. Cousin Mike cracked a joke about Daniel finally locking me down that made everyone within earshot laugh. The reception area was more beautiful than I'd imagined. Ivory roses cascaded from crystal vases on each table, their petals perfect and unblemished. Soft jazz played through the speakers. Nothing too loud, just enough to add elegance to the conversations bubbling up around us. The restaurant had been my first choice for one specific reason: intimacy. I didn't want some massive banquet hall where guests would be scattered across the room like strangers. I wanted everyone close, everyone connected, everyone part of our celebration, and it was working. The energy in the room felt electric in the best way possible. Daniel's parents were already seated at their table near the front, his mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while his father kept patting her hand. They'd flown in from Oregon 3 days earlier and had been nothing but wonderful. My bridesmaids, Sarah, Emily, and my childhood best friend Rachel, were clustered near the bar, their champagne glasses raised in what looked like an ongoing toast. They kept glancing over at me and dissolving into giggles. Then there was my family table, my mom. Lisa sat with perfect posture in her navy dress, the one she'd bought specifically for today after rejecting 17 other options. She looked elegant, composed, every bit the mother of the bride. But something about her expression seemed slightly off, not enough that anyone else would notice, but I'd known her for 28 years. There was a tightness around her eyes, a tension in her smile. My brother Jacob sat next to her, scrolling through his phone with that half-present look he got when he was trying to appear engaged, but wasn't really paying attention. He was 25, worked in tech, and had driven up from Austin the night before. We'd always been close growing up, though life had created more distance between us in recent years. Still, having him here meant everything to me. Dad was noticeably absent, but that was by design. My parents had divorced when I was 14, and their relationship had never recovered enough for casual pleasantries. Inviting both would have meant choosing sides or creating awkward tension, so I'd made the difficult decision to have Mom here and celebrate with Dad separately next month. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best solution I could manage. The restaurant manager, a cheerful woman named Gloria, approached me with a clipboard. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, testing out my new last name with a smile. "We're ready to start seating everyone for dinner service. Should we begin?" Mrs. Hayes. The name still felt foreign to my ears, but I loved it. "Yes, absolutely," I told her. Daniel and I moved to our sweetheart table at the front of the room, and Gloria began guiding guests to their assigned seats. The chatter grew louder as people found their place cards, complimented the centerpieces, and settled in with fresh drinks. Everything was flowing exactly as planned. That's when I noticed my mom standing up. She didn't walk toward the restroom or the buffet table being set up along the far wall. Instead, she leaned down close to Jacob, her mouth nearly touching his ear. I couldn't hear what she said from across the room, but I saw my brother's entire body language shift in an instant. His shoulders tensed. His phone dropped to the table. He turned to look at her with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise? Alarm? Confusion? Mom said something else, just a few words, her hand gripping his forearm with unusual intensity. Jacob pushed back his chair, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Several guests at nearby tables glanced over. He stood up quickly, exchanged one more look with Mom, and then walked toward the exit with purpose in his stride. My heart lurched. "Where's Jacob going?" I whispered to Daniel. He followed my gaze, frowning. Maybe he got a work call or something? But that didn't make sense. Jacob had specifically taken the entire weekend off. He'd told me repeatedly how excited he was to actually be present for once. And the look on his face hadn't been the annoyed expression of someone dealing with a work emergency. It had been something else entirely. I watched the restaurant's front door close behind him, that sense of unease spreading through my chest like spilled wine soaking into fabric. Mom had already sat back down, her face now perfectly neutral, as if nothing unusual had just happened. She picked up her water glass and took a delicate sip, her eyes scanning the room but carefully avoiding mine. What was that about? Sarah appeared at my elbow, practically bouncing with excitement. "Nat, the photographer wants to do the first dance photos before dinner service starts. Are you ready?" I forced myself to smile and nod, pushing down the weird feeling crawling up my spine. "Yeah, of course." Daniel took my hand and led me to the small, cleared area that would serve as our dance floor. The DJ, a friend of Daniel's cousin who'd given us a generous discount, queued up our song, "The Way You Look Tonight" by Frank Sinatra. Classic, romantic, perfect. As Daniel pulled me close and we began to sway, I tried to lose myself in the moment. This was my wedding day. This was supposed to be perfect. Everyone I loved was here celebrating with us, except Jacob had just left, and Mom had been the one to send him away. Over Daniel's shoulder, I caught another glimpse of my mother. She was smiling now, clapping along with the other guests as we danced, looking every bit the proud parent. But there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite identify but recognized on an instinctual level. She was hiding something, and whatever it was important enough to pull my brother away from my wedding reception in the middle of the celebration. The song ended, and applause filled the restaurant. Daniel kissed me softly, and I smiled against his lips, but my mind was already racing with questions I didn't have answers to. What had Mom whispered to Jacob? Where had he gone in such a hurry? And why did I have the sinking feeling that whatever was happening had the potential to unravel this perfect day completely? The servers began bringing out the first course, a butternut squash soup with crispy sage garnish that had tasted amazing during our tasting menu 3 months ago. Now, as I stared down at the swirls of cream in my bowl, my appetite had completely vanished. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. "You okay? You seem distracted." "I'm fine," I lied, picking up my spoon to at least appear normal. "Just taking it all in, you know." He bought it, thankfully, and turned to respond to something his best man Trevor was saying about their college days. I took the opportunity to scan the room again, searching for any sign that Jacob had returned. Nothing. His seat remained empty, his napkin still folded neatly beside his untouched place setting. Mom continued chatting with my Aunt Karen, who sat on her other side, laughing at something with that practiced elegance she'd perfected over the years. How could she act so completely unbothered? I excused myself from the table, mumbling something about checking on the cake delivery, and made my way across the restaurant toward where Mom sat. The heels I'd chosen were already making my feet ache, but I barely noticed. I needed answers. "Mom," I said, leaning down beside her chair and keeping my voice low. "Where did Jacob go?" She looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes that had worked on me countless times throughout my childhood. Oh, he just had to run a quick errand, sweetheart. He'll be back soon." An errand? In the middle of my wedding reception? It was time-sensitive. She patted my hand dismissively. "Don't worry about it. You should be enjoying your special day, not fussing over your brother's comings and goings." The casual way she said it, like Jacob stepping out during the most important event of my life, was perfectly reasonable, made my stomach twist. "What kind of errand, Mom? What did you tell him?" "Natalie." Her voice took on that sharp edge I knew too well, the one that said the conversation was over. "Everything is fine. Go be with your husband." Aunt Karen was watching us now, her expression curious but polite enough not to interrupt. I straightened up, feeling heat creep into my cheeks. This wasn't the time or place for a confrontation, and Mom knew it. She'd effectively backed me into a corner where pushing further would create a scene. I returned to my table, the soup course now cold in front of me. Daniel had finished his and was laughing at something Rachel had said from the adjacent table. Everyone around me was happy, celebrating, completely unaware of the anxiety churning in my gut. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The main course arrived, herb-crusted chicken with roasted vegetables and garlic mashed potatoes. The smell alone should have been heavenly, but all I could think about was that empty chair and Mom's evasive answers. Time sensitive? What could possibly be that urgent? My phone buzzed in the small clutch I'd tucked under my chair. I pulled it out discreetly, hoping to see a text from Jacob explaining everything. Instead, it was from my bridesmaid Sarah. "You look stressed. Want me to spike your water?" I glanced up and found her grinning at me from across the room, clearly trying to lighten my mood. I forced a smile and shook my head, tucking the phone away. Sarah meant well, but she had no idea what was running through my mind. Daniel's father stood up to give a toast, his voice booming across the restaurant with warmth and humor. He talked about the first time Daniel had mentioned me, how his son's face had lit up in a way he'd never seen before. He told an embarrassing story about Daniel's disastrous attempt to cook me dinner early in our relationship, something involving smoke alarms and a ruined lasagna. Everyone laughed in the right places, raised their glasses, and clinked them together in celebration. I went through the motions, smiling and sipping champagne that tasted like nothing on my tongue. Where was Jacob? 45 minutes had passed since he'd left. An errand didn't take 45 minutes, especially not one so urgent it couldn't wait until after dinner. My mind raced through possibilities, each more concerning than the last. Has something happened to Dad? Was there a family emergency Mom didn't want to tell me about on my wedding day? Had Jacob gotten bad news about his job, his health, something else entirely? But none of those scenarios explained Mom's behavior. If it were truly an emergency, she would have looked worried, upset, distressed. Instead, she seemed almost satisfied, like everything was going according to plan. Emily caught my eye from the bar and made an exaggerated swooning gesture at Daniel, trying to make me laugh. I managed a weak smile. My bridesmaids had been incredible throughout this whole process, helping with decorations, throwing me a bachelorette party in Nashville, keeping me sane during the inevitable wedding planning meltdowns. They deserved a bride who was present and joyful, not someone obsessing over a family mystery. The servers cleared the main course plates, and Gloria appeared at my side again. "Ready for the cake cutting? Already?" Time had somehow compressed and expanded simultaneously. I nodded, and she signaled to the DJ, who announced the cake-cutting ceremony. Daniel and I stood, his arm around my waist as we walked to the 3-tiered vanilla almond cake with buttercream frosting that sat on a dedicated table near the window. The photographer positioned us, adjusting the angle to catch the best light. Daniel picked up the silver cake knife, and I placed my hand over his. Flashbulbs went off as we made the first cut together, the blade sliding through the soft layers. We fed each other small bites, Daniel being a perfect gentleman and not smashing it into my face like some grooms did. More applause, more photos, more moments that should have felt magical but instead felt hollow. As guests lined up for their own slices of cake, I saw Mom stand up from her table. My pulse quickened. Was she leaving too? Was she going to meet Jacob wherever he'd gone? But no, she was just heading toward the restroom, her small purse tucked under her arm. She walked with that same unhurried grace, completely at ease, while I felt like I was slowly unraveling. Trevor clinked his glass with a spoon, the sound cutting through the din of conversation. "Speech time," he announced, grinning widely. He launched into a best man toast that was equal parts heartfelt and ridiculous, recounting stories of Daniel's questionable fashion choices in college and his terrible luck with dating apps before meeting me. Everyone roared with laughter. I laughed too, because that's what you do at weddings. You laugh at the speeches and smile for the photos and pretend everything is perfect even when your brother has mysteriously vanished and your mother is clearly hiding something, and you can feel the careful structure of your special day, developing tiny cracks around the edges. Daniel leaned over and kissed my temple. "Having fun?" he whispered. "The best day ever," I whispered back. And in that moment, I realized I'd become just like Mom, smiling and performing while something else entirely churned beneath the surface. The question was, what secret was worth protecting enough to lie to everyone around you? And more importantly, when would I finally get the truth? The DJ transitioned into upbeat dancing music, and several guests immediately flooded the makeshift dance floor. Daniel's cousin Amy grabbed her husband's hand and pulled him into an enthusiastic swing dance that made everyone cheer. The energy in the room had shifted from formal dinner reception to full celebration mode. I should have been out there with them. Instead, I found myself standing near the window, pretending to admire the view of the downtown street outside, while my eyes kept darting toward the entrance. Rachel materialized beside me, champagne glass in hand. "Okay, spill. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said automatically. "Natalie, I've known you since we were 8 years old. I can tell when you're faking it." She took a sip of her champagne, studying my face. "Is it Daniel? Are you having cold feet or something?" "No, God, no. Daniel's perfect. This whole day is perfect. Then why do you look like you're about to throw up?" I hesitated, weighing whether to pull Rachel into my spiral of anxiety. But keeping it bottled up was making it worse, and if anyone would understand, it was her. "It's Jacob. He left over an hour ago, and Mom won't tell me where he went or why." Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "He just left? In the middle of your wedding?" Mom whispered something to him during dinner service, and he took off immediately. She said it was a time-sensitive errand, but that makes no sense. "What errand can't wait a few hours?" "That is weird," Rachel admitted, glancing over at where Mom now stood talking with Daniel's mother near the gift table. "Have you tried calling him?" I hadn't. The thought seemed so obvious now that I felt stupid for not doing it sooner. No, I didn't want to seem like a paranoid bride on her wedding day. "Girl, your brother disappeared." "That's not paranoia, that's justified concern." Rachel pulled out her phone. "Want me to text him?" "I can play it casually, like I'm not asking for you." Before I could answer, the restaurant door swung open. Jacob walked in. Relief flooded through me so intensely that my knees actually felt weak. He was back. He was fine. Everything was going to be okay. But as he got closer, I realized something was off. His face was flushed, and there was a slight sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the cool October evening. He carried a large shopping bag from Brooks' department store, the handles gripped tightly in his hand. His dress shirt had come partially untucked on one side. He made a beeline straight for Mom's table, not even glancing in my direction. I watched as he set the bag down beside her chair and leaned in to say something. Mom's face transformed, her usual composed expression breaking into something that looked almost like relief mixed with triumph. "What the hell is happening?" Rachel muttered beside me. Mom reached into the shopping bag and pulled out what looked like a suit jacket, examining it briefly before nodding at Jacob. They exchanged a few more words, and then Jacob headed toward the restroom, still carrying the bag. I'd had enough. I crossed the restaurant floor, weaving between dancing guests and around tables, my wedding dress swishing with each determined step. Mom saw me coming and straightened up, that neutral mask sliding back into place. "Where did he go?" I demanded, not caring that my voice came out sharper than intended. "Shopping, sweetheart." "I told you it was just an errand." "Shopping for what?" Why was it so urgent that he had to leave my wedding reception? Mom sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "Your Uncle Richard is going to be here soon, and Jacob didn't bring appropriate attire for the evening portion. I sent him to pick up something suitable." I stared at her, processing this explanation. Uncle Richard, my dad's brother, had RSVP'd weeks ago saying he could only make it to the evening reception, not the dinner, because of work commitments. He and Jacob had always been close, and Jacob would definitely want to look presentable for him. It made sense. Sort of. You couldn't have mentioned this to me? I asked, my anger deflating slightly but not disappearing entirely. I've been worried sick for over an hour. I didn't want to bother you with something so trivial on your special day. Mom reached out and touched my arm, her voice softening. I was handling it. That's what mothers do. The explanation felt almost plausible, but something still nagged at me. Why had Jacob looked so alarmed when Mom whispered to him? Why the urgency, the immediate exit? Couldn't the shopping trip have waited until after the cake cutting, or the first dance, or literally any other less disruptive moment? Daniel appeared at my side, his hand finding mine. Is everything okay over here? Everything's fine, Mom answered before I could. Just some family coordination. Nothing to worry about. Jacob emerged from the restroom and I barely recognized him. He'd changed into a completely different outfit. A sharp charcoal gray suit with a crisp white shirt and a burgundy tie that actually matched the wedding colors perfectly. His hair was freshly combed, and he'd clearly splashed water on his face. He looked like he'd just arrived fresh from home, not like someone who'd been sitting through dinner service. He walked over to us, and for the first time since returning, he made eye contact with me. Hey, Nat, sorry about that. I had to take care of something. Mom said you went shopping for Uncle Richard's arrival? Yeah. He adjusted his new tie, not quite meeting my eyes. Didn't want to look like a slob when he got here, you know? But Jacob had looked fine before. His original outfit had been a perfectly nice navy suit with a light blue shirt. Nothing about it would have been considered inappropriate or sloppy for a wedding reception. Your original suit was perfectly fine, Jacob. He shrugged. Mom thought this would be better. And she was right. This does look more formal. I looked between them. My brother in his new suit, my mother with her satisfied expression, the shopping bag now tucked discreetly under the table. Everything they were saying made logical sense, but the feeling in my gut told me I was only getting part of the story. Okay, I said finally, because what else could I do? Start an interrogation in the middle of my wedding reception? Accuse them both of lying when I had no proof beyond intuition? Daniel must have sensed my lingering unease because he gently steered me away. Come on, Mrs. Hayes, they're about to play our song again. Dance with me? I let him lead me to the dance floor, but over his shoulder I kept watching Mom and Jacob. They stood together near their table, having what looked like a brief but intense conversation. Mom's hand rested on Jacob's shoulder, and she was speaking quickly, her lips barely moving. Jacob nodded once, twice, then glanced around the room as if checking whether anyone was watching them. I was watching them. And whatever was really going on, I was going to find out, even if it meant ruining my own wedding reception to get to the truth. The evening reception was in full swing. More guests had arrived, friends who couldn't make the dinner portion, a few of Daniel's work colleagues, and some extended family members. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and conversation, the dance floor packed with people moving to an old Motown classic. I tried to lose myself in the celebration. I really did. But every few minutes my eyes drifted back to where Jacob sat, now looking completely comfortable in his new suit, chatting with some cousins I hadn't seen in years. Mom had relocated to a different table, holding court with my aunts, her wine glass catching the light, as she gestured animatedly while telling some story. They both looked so normal, like nothing strange had happened at all. Sarah grabbed my hand and dragged me onto the dance floor for a group dance with the bridesmaids. Emily was already there, doing some ridiculous moves that made everyone laugh. For a few minutes, I actually managed to forget about the weirdness and just enjoy being surrounded by my closest friends. All of us in our matching burgundy dresses, dancing like nobody was watching, even though everyone definitely was. Then I saw Uncle Richard walk through the door. He was hard to miss, tall and broad-shouldered, with the same salt and pepper hair my dad had but styled differently. He wore a tan sport coat over dark jeans, decidedly more casual than most of the guests. His eyes scanned the restaurant, and when they landed on me, his whole face lit up. "There's the bride," he boomed, crossing the room with his arms outstretched. I met him halfway, letting him pull me into one of his signature bear hugs that lifted me slightly off the ground. Uncle Richard had always been the fun uncle, the one who snuck us extra dessert at family gatherings and told stories that made my dad shake his head in exasperation. "You look absolutely stunning, Natalie," he said, holding me at arm's length to get a better look. "Your dad's going to be so sorry he missed this." "We're having dinner with him next month," I explained. "Easier this way. Smart thinking. Less drama." He winked, then glanced around. "Where's that new husband of yours? I need to give him the obligatory uncle speech about treating you right." I pointed toward where Daniel stood near the bar with Trevor, and Uncle Richard headed that direction with determined steps. I watched them shake hands, saw Richard lean in to say something that made Daniel nod seriously, before they both burst out laughing. My eyes drifted back to Jacob, expecting to see him making his way over to greet Uncle Richard, the whole reason he'd supposedly needed to leave and buy a new suit. But Jacob wasn't moving toward them. In fact, he seemed to be actively avoiding looking in their direction. He was deep in conversation with my cousin Sophie, his body angled away from where Uncle Richard stood. That was strange. Jacob and Uncle Richard were close. They texted regularly, met up for basketball games when Richard visited Austin, and had inside jokes that dated back to Jacob's childhood. Why wasn't Jacob rushing over to say hello? I made my way through the crowd, intercepting Uncle Richard as he finished his conversation with Daniel. "Hey, Uncle Richard, Jacob's over there." "I'm sure he's excited to see you." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "Jacob's here?" I wasn't sure if he'd make it. "Thought he might still be in Boston," my brain stuttered. "Boston?" "Yeah, his work conference. He mentioned it last week when we talked." Richard looked around the room. "Where is he?" "He's right. Wait, what work conference?" "Some tech thing. 3-day event." He was complaining about having to present on a Sunday. Richard spotted Jacob across the room and waved. "There he is!" "Look at him, all dressed up fancy." Jacob had no choice but to acknowledge them now. He smiled and started walking over. But there was something hesitant in his movements, like a kid who'd been caught doing something they shouldn't. "Richard, good to see you, man," Jacob said, his voice just a touch too enthusiastic as they exchanged a handshake-hug combination. "You made it after all," Richard said. "Figured you'd still be stuck in Boston presenting about, what was it, cloud infrastructure?" "Oh, they shifted the schedule around. Got out early." Jacob's hand went to his tie, adjusting it unnecessarily. "Caught a last-minute flight." I stared at my brother. He was lying. I knew he was lying. There had been no work conference in Boston, no last-minute flight, no presentation about cloud infrastructure. Jacob worked from home 3 days a week, and had specifically told me 2 weeks ago that he'd taken the entire week off for the wedding, but Uncle Richard seemed to buy it completely, launching into a story about his own business trip nightmares. Jacob laughed at the appropriate moments, asked follow-up questions, and played the part perfectly. Mom appeared seemingly out of nowhere, touching Richard's elbow. "Richard! So glad you could make it. Come, let me introduce you to Daniel's parents." She swept him away before I could process what had just happened, leaving me standing there with Jacob. "Boston?" I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the music. Jacob's smile faltered for just a second. "Yeah, it was a last-minute thing that came up. You told me you took the whole week off. You said work was completely covered. Plans changed, Nat. It happens in tech all the time. You know that." "So you went to Boston for a work conference, flew back today, and then in the middle of my wedding reception, you left to buy a new suit because—" "Why? What was wrong with the suit you wore to the ceremony?" His jaw tightened. "Mom wanted me to look more formal for the evening reception." "I don't know what to tell you. It's not that deep. Then why did Uncle Richard think you might not even be here? Why did he seem surprised to see you?" "Because I told him I might not make it if the conference ran late." "But it didn't, so here I am." Jacob glanced around, clearly looking for an escape route. Look, I don't know why you're interrogating me like this. I'm here, I'm celebrating your wedding. Isn't that what matters? He was deflecting, turning it back on me, making me feel like I was the unreasonable one for asking basic questions. It was a tactic I'd seen him use before when he didn't want to talk about something. Jacob, I need another drink, he said abruptly, and walked away before I could stop him. I stood there in the middle of the celebration, guests dancing and laughing all around me, feeling like I was in some alternate reality where nothing made sense. The lies were stacking up, becoming more obvious and more complicated. Jacob hadn't been in Boston. There was no conference. Uncle Richard's surprise at seeing him proved that. So where had Jacob really been? And why were he and Mom creating this elaborate story? Daniel found me again, concerned about creasing his forehead. You okay? You've disappeared into your head again. I wanted to tell him everything. About the whispered conversation, the mysterious shopping trip, the Boston lie, all of it. But this was our wedding day. Our guests were having an amazing time. The DJ was playing all the right songs. The night was perfect for everyone except me. I'm fine, I said, and kissed him softly. Just a little overwhelmed by everything. Good overwhelmed or bad overwhelmed. Good, I lied, becoming more like my mother with every passing hour. Definitely good. But as Daniel pulled me back onto the dance floor, I made a decision. Tonight, I would be the perfect bride. I would smile and dance and thank every guest for coming. But tomorrow, I was getting answers. And neither Mom nor Jacob was going to deflect their way out of telling me the truth. The reception rolled past midnight. Most of the older guests had already left, hugging me goodbye with promises to see the wedding photos soon. Daniel's parents had departed around 11, his mother tearfully embracing both of us at least 5 times before his father finally managed to guide her toward the door. The restaurant had that comfortable, lived-in feeling now, jackets draped over chairs, centerpieces slightly askew. The dance floor littered with abandoned shoes from guests who'd decided comfort was more important than fashion. I'd managed to push the Jacob situation to the back of my mind for a while. The bouquet toss had been chaotic and hilarious, with Rachel accidentally catching it despite actively trying to avoid it. The garter removal had Daniel's face turning bright red while his friends whooped and hollered. We'd cut into the groom's cake, a chocolate masterpiece shaped like a football that Daniel's college roommate had insisted on ordering. For stretches of time, I'd actually felt like a normal bride enjoying her wedding reception. But then I'd catch sight of Mom and Jacob exchanging glances across the room. Or I'd remember Uncle Richard's confusion about the Boston conference that never existed, and the anxiety would come flooding back. Now, as the night wound down, the photographer approached me with her camera and a tired but satisfied smile. Natalie, I think we got some incredible shots today. Want to see a few of my favorites? I welcomed the distraction. Absolutely. She scrolled through her camera's display screen, showing me moments I'd been too preoccupied to fully appreciate in real time. There was one of Daniel and me during the ceremony, his eyes glistening with tears as I'd said my vows. Another of all the bridesmaids laughing hysterically at something during the getting ready photos. A candid shot of Daniel's grandmother dancing with his young nephew that was absolutely precious. Oh, and this one, the photographer said, stopping on a particular image. I love the composition of this family shot. She turned the camera toward me and my breath caught. It was a photo taken during the dinner service before Jacob had left. The angle captured our family table from across the room. Mom, Jacob, and Aunt Karen all seated together. But it wasn't the main subjects that caught my attention. In the background, slightly out of focus but still visible, was the restaurant's entrance. And walking through that door, you could just make out a figure in a navy suit. Jacob's original suit. I leaned closer, studying the image. The timestamp showed 6:47 p.m., about 10 minutes before Mom had whispered to Jacob and sent him away. The person in the doorway was definitely male, definitely in formal attire, and appeared to be looking directly at our family table. Can you zoom in on the background? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The photographer looked confused but obliged, enlarging the image. The figure became slightly clearer, though still grainy from the distance and lighting. He had dark hair, was probably in his 30s, and carried what looked like a manila envelope under his arm. "Who is that?" I muttered, more to myself than to the photographer. "Oh, I'm not sure. Probably just someone from the restaurant staff or maybe a guest arriving late." She scrolled to the next image. "Anyway, this one of you and Daniel cutting the cake?" But I'd stopped listening. That man wasn't a restaurant staff member. His body language was all wrong, too purposeful, too focused. And guests didn't typically arrive carrying manila envelopes to wedding receptions. Has Mom seen him enter? Was that why she'd immediately sent Jacob away? My mind raced through the timeline. Mystery man enters at 6:47 p.m. Mom whispers to Jacob around 6:55 p.m. Jacob leaves. Approximately 7 p.m. Jacob returns at 8:15 p.m. with a completely new outfit and a story about shopping for Uncle Richard. That made no sense. "Could you email me that photo?" I asked the photographer. "The one with the family table?" "Sure, of course. I'll send you the full gallery within 2 weeks. But I can email you any specific shots you want tonight." She pulled out her phone to take down my email address. Daniel appeared with 2 glasses of champagne. His tie loosened and his hair adorably mussed from all the dancing. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere." "Ready to do the last dance before we wrap up?" The DJ was already queuing up our exit song. Signed, Sealed, Delivered by Stevie Wonder. It was supposed to be fun and upbeat, a celebration as we transitioned from the reception to our new life together. "Yeah, let's do it," I said, taking his hand. As we danced, surrounded by the remaining guests forming a circle around us, I caught sight of Mom gathering her things from the table. She looked tired now, the careful composure she'd maintained all evening finally showing cracks. Jacob stood nearby, his new suit jacket slung over one arm, checking his phone. They were getting ready to leave. The song ended, and everyone applauded. Daniel dipped me dramatically, making everyone laugh and cheer. We held the pose for the photographer, and when he pulled me back up, his eyes were shining with pure happiness. "I can't believe you're my wife," he said softly. "I can't believe you're stuck with me now," I teased. But my heart swelled. Whatever else was happening, whatever mysteries surrounded my family, this part was real and good and right. We made our way through the remaining guests, accepting final congratulations and hugs. Rachel pulled me aside near the coat check. "So, did you ever figure out what was up with Jacob?" she asked quietly. "Not even close. It's just gotten more confusing." I glanced over at where Mom was hugging Aunt Karen goodbye. "But I'm going to find out, tomorrow. Want backup? I can come over and play bad cop while you play good cop." I smiled, grateful for her offer. "I might take you up on that." Mom approached us, her purse tucked under her arm. "Sweetheart, what a beautiful wedding." Everything was absolutely perfect. That word again. As if nothing unusual had happened, as if the evening had gone exactly according to plan, which, I was beginning to suspect, maybe it had. Just not the plan I'd been aware of. "Thanks. Mom, thanks for everything." I hugged her, trying to detect any hint of guilt or nervousness in her embrace. Nothing. She was as steady as ever. "Jacob and I are heading out. We're both exhausted. You two have a wonderful wedding night, and I'll see you when you get back from your honeymoon." She kissed my cheek, then moved to say goodbye to Daniel. Jacob came over next, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. In the dim lighting of the winding down reception, he looked younger somehow. More like the brother who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework. Congrats. Nat, really. You and Daniel are great together. "Thanks for being here," I said carefully. "I know it was complicated with your schedule." Something flickered across his face. Guilt? Regret? It was gone too quickly to identify. "Wouldn't have missed it for anything," he said, and pulled me into a hug. Over his shoulder, I saw Mom waiting by the door, her eyes on both of us. For just a second, her expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read. Sadness, relief, satisfaction that her plan, whatever it was, had succeeded. Then Jacob let go, and the moment passed. I watched them leave together, Mom's hand briefly touching Jacob's back as they walked out into the October night. The door closed behind them, and I was left with more questions than I'd started with. But I also had that photograph. The one with the mysterious man in the doorway, the one carrying a manila envelope, the one whose arrival had triggered everything that followed. Tomorrow, I'll start finding answers. Tonight, I'd focus on Daniel and on salvaging what should have been the happiest day of my life, even if part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just watched something significant happen right in front of me, disguised as a simple family gathering. Sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains, creating geometric patterns across the white comforter. I woke to the sound of Daniel's steady breathing beside me and the distant hum of traffic below. For one blissful moment, I forgot about everything except the fact that I was now married to the man I loved. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand, and reality came flooding back. It was an email notification from the photographer. Wedding preview photos. Walker, Hayes wedding. I grabbed my phone, careful not to wake Daniel, and opened the message. She'd sent about 20 images from the reception, including the one I'd specifically requested, the family table shot with the mystery man in the background. I zoomed in on the figure in the doorway. In the clearer version she'd sent, I could make out more details. He was maybe mid-30s, clean-shaven, with an intense expression. The manila envelope under his arm looked thick, stuffed with papers. And he was definitely looking at someone specific in the room, his gaze laser-focused in the direction of our family table. Who was he? And what was in that envelope? Daniel stirred beside me, his arm reaching across the bed. "Morning, wife," he mumbled, his voice still thick with sleep. "Morning, husband." I set my phone down and turned to face him, letting myself enjoy this moment. We'd talked about sleeping in, ordering room service, maybe not leaving the hotel room until our 3 p.m. checkout time, but I couldn't stop thinking about Mom and Jacob. "What time did you want to head to brunch?" Daniel asked, stretching. We'd planned a post-wedding brunch with close family and friends at a cafe downtown. Nothing formal. Just a casual gathering to decompress and say goodbye to out-of-town guests before they left. "Brunch starts at 10, I said, glancing at the clock. It was 8:47 a.m. "We should probably start getting ready soon." Daniel groaned playfully but pulled himself out of bed. "Fine, but I'm ordering the biggest stack of pancakes they have. I barely ate anything yesterday." While he showered, I pulled up the photo again, studying every pixel. There had to be a way to figure out who this man was. Could I reverse image search his face? Probably not from this grainy distance shot. Could I ask someone at the restaurant if they remembered seeing him? Maybe, but would they even know? My phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hey, Mom. Good morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Did you and Daniel have a wonderful night?" Her voice was bright and cheerful, the same tone she used when everything was perfectly fine and there was nothing to worry about. It made my jaw clench. It was great. "We're getting ready for brunch now." "Oh, good. I wanted to call before you got there." She paused, and I could hear her moving around in the background. "Jacob isn't going to be able to make it this morning. Something came up with work. You know how it is with these tech companies. They never give him a break, of course." Another convenient excuse. "What came up?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Oh, I don't know the details. Some server issue or database thing. He was up half the night dealing with it on his laptop." She sighed dramatically. "I told him he works too hard." Jacob had been staying at Mom's house for the weekend, which meant Mom had a front row seat to whatever he was actually doing last night. And if her story was true, she would have seen him working. But something in her voice told me she was covering for him again. That's too bad. "I was hoping to talk to him this morning." "Well, I'll be there. We can catch up then." There was a slight edge to her voice, a warning masked as pleasantness. "I should let you go. See you at 10? She hung up before I could respond. Daniel emerged from the bathroom, toweling his hair dry. "Who was that?" "Mom, Jacob's not coming to brunch. Apparently I have a work emergency. On a Sunday morning? That sucks." He didn't seem suspicious, just sympathetic. Because Daniel didn't know about the Boston lie or the mysterious shopping trip or the man with the manila envelope. I hadn't told him any of it. The cafe was exactly the kind of place I loved. Exposed brick walls, mismatched vintage furniture, the smell of fresh coffee and maple syrup hanging in the air. About 15 people had shown up for brunch. Rachel and Emily from the bridal party, Daniel's best man, Trevor, and his girlfriend, a few cousins, Uncle Richard, and Mom. Everyone was in good spirits, laughing and recounting their favorite moments from the wedding. Trevor was telling an elaborate story about nearly dropping the rings during the ceremony, embellishing details to make it funnier. Rachel kept making jokes about catching the bouquet and how she was definitely not ready for marriage. Mom sat at the end of the table, sipping her coffee and looking completely at ease. She wore a cream-colored sweater and had her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Every inch the picture of a proud mother the day after her daughter's wedding. I watched her carefully while pretending to focus on my eggs Benedict. She laughed at Trevor's stories, asked Daniel's friends about their jobs, complimented Emily on her dress from yesterday. Nothing in her demeanor suggested she was hiding anything, but she was. I knew she was. Uncle Richard sat across from me, working his way through a massive plate of biscuits and gravy. Natalie, I meant to tell you yesterday. That was one hell of a party. Haven't danced that much in years. I'm glad you could make it, I said. Then, as casually as I could manage, did Jacob mention when he's heading back to Austin? Richard looked up from his plate. Austin. I thought he was still staying in Portland for a while. The table seemed to tilt slightly. Portland? Yeah, with your mom. Didn't he move back a few months ago? Richard glanced at Mom, who had gone very still. Or am I getting my wires crossed? I swear he mentioned subletting his place in Austin. Mom's coffee cup clinked against her saucer as she set it down. Jacob's been going back and forth, Richard. Work has him traveling quite a bit. It's hard to keep track of where he is half the time. But that didn't answer the question. Had Jacob moved back to Portland or not? And if he had, why hadn't anyone told me? Why would he move back in with Mom after living independently for years? I must have misunderstood, Richard said amiably, already moving on. But I hadn't misunderstood anything. This was another piece of information that didn't fit. Jacob had his own apartment in Austin, a job he loved, a whole life there. Moving back to Portland at 25 didn't make sense unless something had happened, something big. After brunch, as guests started filtering out to catch flights or begin their drives home, I cornered Mom near the cafe's entrance. Is Jacob living with you? I asked directly. She adjusted her purse strap, not meeting my eyes. He's staying with me temporarily while he figures some things out. What things? Natalie, this isn't the time or place. You keep saying that. When is the right time? Because I'm getting really tired of being kept in the dark about my own brother. Her expression hardened. Your brother is fine. He's handling his business, and you need to focus on your honeymoon and your new marriage instead of creating problems where there aren't any. Creating problems? Mom, he lied about being in Boston. He left my wedding for over an hour. He's apparently moved back home without telling me. Those aren't problems I created. Those are facts I'm trying to understand. Lower your voice, she hissed, glancing around at the remaining guests. We're not doing this here. Then when? She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Conflict, maybe guilt, something that suggested she was weighing options in her head. After your honeymoon, she said finally. Come to dinner at my house when you get back. We'll talk then. All three of us. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was something. Promise? I promise. She touched my cheek gently, her voice softening. Just trust me for a little bit longer, sweetheart. Please. And then she was gone, leaving me standing there with more questions than ever, and a promise that felt simultaneously like a victory and a delay tactic. 2 weeks later, I stood on Mom's front porch with a bottle of wine in one hand and my car keys in the other. The honeymoon in Hawaii had been incredible. White sand beaches, crystal clear water, Mai Tais at sunset. Daniel and I had snorkeled, hiked, and spent lazy afternoons reading on our balcony. For those 14 days, I'd almost managed to forget about the wedding mystery. Almost. But now I was back. And it was time for answers. I rang the doorbell, and Mom answered almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the door. "Natalie, come in, come in. You look so tan." The house smelled like her signature pot roast, the one she made for special occasions. The dining room table was already set for 3, with the good china and cloth napkins. She was pulling out all the stops. Jacob emerged from the kitchen, and I was struck by how different he looked from just 2 weeks ago. He'd lost weight, not a lot, but enough to be noticeable. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual confident posture seemed diminished somehow. "Hey, Nat," he said, managing a small smile. "How was Hawaii?" "Amazing, but I didn't come here to talk about my honeymoon." I set the wine bottle on the counter with more force than necessary. I came for the truth. All of it. Mom and Jacob exchanged a look, the kind of silent communication that happens between people who've been coordinating their stories. Then Mom gestured toward the living room. "Let's sit down. This is going to take a while." We settled into the familiar furniture, me on the armchair I'd claimed as mine throughout my teenage years, Mom and Jacob on the couch. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Jacob broke the silence. "I'm being sued," he said quietly. "By my former business partner. For $300,000, the words hung in the air. I blinked, trying to process. "What?" "About a year ago, I started a side business with a guy I met through work. His name was Marcus Preston. We were developing an app together, splitting everything 50-50. Investment costs, development hours, decision-making, all of it." Jacob's hands twisted together in his lap. "The app actually started doing well. Really well. We were getting investors interested, talking about a potential acquisition. That's great, though. Isn't it?" It would have been. Except Marcus had been cooking the books. He'd been funneling investor money into his personal accounts, claiming business expenses that never existed. When I found out and confronted him, he tried to get me to go along with it. Said we could split the extra money, that nobody would know. I felt my stomach drop. "Please tell me you didn't." "Of course I didn't." Jacob's voice cracked slightly. I refused. I told him we had to come clean, return the money, and make it right. But Marcus had already thought 3 steps ahead. He'd been creating a paper trail that made it look like I was the one embezzling funds. Forged emails, fake receipts with my digital signature, bank transfers that appeared to come from accounts I didn't even know existed. Mom reached over and squeezed Jacob's hand. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying recently. When the investors found out money was missing, Marcus pointed all the evidence at me, Jacob continued. He claimed I'd been stealing from the company and that he'd only just discovered it. By the time I realized what was happening, he'd already filed a lawsuit claiming I owed him, and the business, $300,000 in stolen funds and damages. Oh my God! Jacob! My anger from moments ago had evaporated, replaced by horror. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" "Because I was ashamed," he said simply. "And because I didn't want to ruin your wedding. You were so happy. Everything was going so perfectly for you and Daniel. How was I supposed to show up and say, 'Hey, congrats on getting married, by the way. I'm potentially going to prison for fraud I didn't commit?'" The pieces were starting to fall into place. "The man at the restaurant? The one with the manila envelope?" Jacob nodded. "That was Marcus's lawyer. A process server. He'd been trying to track me down for weeks to serve me papers for a deposition. I'd been dodging him, changing my routine, staying off social media. But somehow he found out about your wedding. How?" I asked, my Facebook account. I'd RSVP'd to your wedding event months earlier before any of this happened. The event listing had the venue information. Jacob rubbed his face tiredly. Marcus's lawyer must have been monitoring my account. He showed up at the restaurant, asked for me by name at the host stand. Mom picked up the story. I saw him come in. I recognized him from photos Jacob had shown me. Marcus's attorney, Andrew Carlisle. I knew if he served Jacob those papers right there in the middle of your reception, it would cause a scene. Reporters sometimes follow process servers to high-profile cases, and this has been making some noise in the tech community. Your wedding would have been disrupted, maybe even made the news. So you sent Jacob away, I said slowly. I told him to leave immediately, go home, and change out of his suit, Mom confirmed. If the lawyer came looking for him and didn't find him, he couldn't serve the papers that night. Legally, you can't be served if you're not physically present to receive them. But the shopping story? The new suit for Uncle Richard? Jacob grimaced. We needed a cover story that sounded plausible. Mom suggested the Uncle Richard angle because we knew he was coming later. I did go shopping, but only because I needed to change clothes entirely. Different colors, different styles. If Carlisle was waiting outside the restaurant, I didn't want him to recognize me when I came back. I stayed behind and kept an eye on Carlisle, Mom added. He waited by the entrance for about 45 minutes, then finally left. Once I was sure he was gone, I texted Jacob that it was safe to return. I sat back in the chair, my mind reeling. And the Boston conference? That was real, actually, Jacob said. Or it was supposed to be. I'd told Uncle Richard weeks ago that I might have to present there and might miss your wedding. But when everything exploded with Marcus and the lawsuit, I canceled the trip. I never updated Uncle Richard because honestly, I was barely keeping track of who I'd told what. I was just trying to survive each day. And living here? You moved back home? I had to. Jacob's voice was barely above a whisper. The legal fees are bankrupting me. I've already spent over $60,000 on attorneys. I lost my apartment in Austin and had to break my lease early. Mom offered to let me stay here while I fight this case. We've been meeting with lawyers, going through discovery, trying to prove that Marcus falsified everything. Mom stood up and walked to a drawer in the sideboard, pulling out a thick folder. She handed it to me. Inside were legal documents, printouts of emails, bank statements, everything with official stamps and highlighted sections. We've been building our defense, Mom said. We hired a forensic accountant who's been finding inconsistencies in Marcus's documentation. We have a good chance of proving Jacob's innocence. But it's slow, and it's expensive, and it's been absolutely destroying him emotionally. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw the toll this had taken. The weight loss, the exhaustion, the way he seemed to carry the world on his shoulders. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked, my voice breaking. I could have helped. I could have been there for you. You were planning your wedding, Jacob said. The biggest day of your life. How could I dump this on you? Every time you'd called over the past few months, you were so excited about color schemes and seating charts and cake flavors. I couldn't steal that joy from you. Tears were streaming down my face now. You're my brother. You're more important than centerpieces and cake. But your wedding only happens once, he said softly. I wanted you to have that perfect day, even if it meant lying to protect it. Mom sat back down beside Jacob, and suddenly I saw them not as the people keeping secrets from me, but as two people trying to shield me from pain while drowning on their own. I'm so sorry, Jacob said, for lying, for disappearing during your reception, for all of it. I didn't know what else to do. I moved from the armchair to the couch, squeezing in between them. I put one arm around Jacob and took Mom's hand with my other. We're family, I said firmly, which means we face things together. No more secrets. No more protecting me from hard things. If you're going through hell, I want to be there with you. Jacob leaned his head against my shoulder, and I felt him shake with silent sobs. Mom's grip on my hand tightened. We sat there for a long time, the pot roast probably getting cold in the kitchen, the carefully set table waiting. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was this. The truth was finally out. And now, whatever came next, we'd face it together. The mystery of my wedding day had been solved. My brother wasn't a criminal. He was a victim trying to protect his sister's happiness even while his own world crumbled. And somehow, understanding that made all the confusion and frustration from that day dissolve into something else entirely. Fierce, protective love for my family. Because that's what family does. They show up. They protect each other. And when the truth finally comes out, no matter how painful, they stand together and figure out what comes next. together. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.